Hello, everyone, and welcome to Devolutions HQ. In today's episode, we have a very special Skype call with Tim Warner. He is a PluralSight technical author as well as a cloud solution architect, and he's also one of Microsoft's MVPs for cloud and data center management. Anyway, I thought he'd be a great guest to have on the show today. He's going to talk to us a little bit about PowerShell and how it interacts with Remote Desktop Manager. And he's an overall really cool guy. I think you guys will love his technical expertise. And I'm excited, Tim. Thanks for joining us on the call today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sure thing. Well, I define myself professionally as a blend of an IT teacher, technical trainer, and an IT professional. I've been in the industry full-time for a little over 20 years, and it's always for me been a split between the actual industry work, systems administration, and more recently public cloud and architecture, with education. I've always had an aptitude for teaching and writing, so I write books and articles. My full-time gig is with PluralSight as a full-time staff author, so I design and make courses for them, and people consume and use the courses all around the world. Over the last couple years, I've collapsed really upon the Microsoft Azure public cloud, although I've been a Microsoft specialist for the entire run of my career.
Wow, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, good. I love having experts on the show because I'm not an expert in those areas. But
everybody's an expert in something, and nobody's
Absolutely.
an expert in everything.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, same here.
So, anyway, okay, great. The other thing I was going to ask you about was, how did you find out about Devolutions products? So I know we talk about RDM, Remote Desktop Manager, but tell us a little bit about how you came about our solutions.
Yeah, sure thing. I've been writing for the 4SysOps technology blog for a long time. It's got to be over 10 years now. And it was through 4SysOps that I came to know your solutions and products. At this point, I believe I've done product reviews for 3 of your 4 products. Remote Desktop Manager, of course, Password Server, and Wake Now. I don't think I've written anything on Password Hub yet. But I was so impressed with RDM specifically, and I just kept in touch with you guys ever since that review, and we've had a good relationship ever since, and I just love RDM specifically. I mean, anybody who's been using, say, the Windows Remote Desktop Protocol knows that Microsoft has a application called Remote Desktop Connection Manager. It's years and years old. It hasn't been updated. And that was pretty much the default way. If you had more than one RDP session that you wanted to connect, you would use that. Well, RDM takes that idea and just goes off into the stratosphere.
Well, that's cool. Now, how do you, using RDM, how do you use it on what's your role with RDM in your personal and also your work professional aspect? How do you use it?
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, it's funny, there's that old saying about the Microsoft Office applications that say Word. Microsoft Word has this boatload of features, and 99% of the world probably uses 5% of the features. Sure. I'm kind of like that with RDM. There's so much in the tool. I find I learn something new almost every day. Yeah. So I guess I'm trying to cover myself, Jan, when you see that I only know a sliver of RDM's total capability.
Sure, that's fine.
I started using it simply as a way to organize multiple remote connections, but I've since branched out and broadened and deepened using your cloud server. Instead of having the local database, I store all of my sessions in the Devolutions cloud. Yeah. And because I have RDM Enterprise installed on all of my workstations, it's lovely to be able to centrally get to all my sessions no matter where I am. Absolutely. So specifically in my work, I'm using VMs every single day, almost always in the Azure cloud. I speak at conferences, and all of my conference demos are organized in RDM folders. My book, same thing. Whenever I have a case to remotely manage systems, it makes sense. With the templating system and being able to quickly clone sessions. It just makes all the sense in the world to rely on the tool every single workday.
That's really good. All right. Well, one of the things I thought would be really cool was, I know you said you're kind of a PowerShell expert, or you didn't say that, but I was told by other sources. But I'm not a PowerShell expert, so I thought what would be great would be for you to show maybe how you use PowerShell to interact with Remote Desktop Manager, or even just PowerShell scripts in general. So I think you're going to be able to share your screen, hopefully,
right?
And we'll take a look from there.
All right, so what we're looking at is my Visual Studio Code editor, and I've got a script file that I'm using for our demo today. And if you want this file, you can grab it directly from my GitHub repository. You see on line 4, that's timw.info/summer 2019. That'll take you to the repo. And the name of this file is Warner Devolutions RDM.
Okay, great.
Okay, so to set the stage here, more recently, I've always been aware that RDM had PowerShell support, but fairly recently I started thinking in terms of what could I possibly automate? Because I'd mentioned a moment ago that I'm creating new sessions regularly, and you can right-click the session and duplicate it and all that. But PowerShell is all about administrative automation. So I was thinking along the lines of what I guess we could call the control plane. Yeah. How could we dip into PowerShell to control the behavior of RDM? And then the other side, what I guess I'd call the data plane, would be how can we use the RDM commandlets and the RDM functionality, actually, to send PowerShell into my session virtual machines. Okay, so that's what we've got going on here. And the other thing I really want to transmit in this session is to help users who are new to PowerShell in RDM. I want to make sure to give you all the tools you need to get productive right off the bat. Not to say it's non-intuitive or hard to find necessarily, but sure. I'm hoping that my research will bear fruit in saving you some time. All right, so the first thing you should know about is under Help, RemoteDesktopManager.com. This link here, it goes out to the PowerShell commandlets documentation. And on line 11, this goes out to forum.devolutions.net. I actually have in my Firefox browser those pages already loaded up. Nice. You should know where the help is, right? So this is the RDM online help, and there's a folder in there that goes into PowerShell scripting, and it gives you the online help article for each of your commandlets. And in keeping with PowerShell best practices, the noun stem of all of those commandlets is RDM, which makes sense. It's intuitive. Perfect. As far as the Devolutions support site I had mentioned, this is where I found, it's called the RDM PowerShell repository. Essentially, it looks like a combination of Erica, who seems like quite a scripter.
Yes, she is.
She's posted a bunch of, helpful scripts and script segments, and it's also a Q&A where you can get customers asking questions and then engineers from Devolutions oftentimes providing code and response. So I think those 2 pages are really useful for you to bookmark.
Fantastic.
Okay, now assuming that you've got RDM installed on your system, let me quickly jump over here and let me bring down the toolbar. You can go to the Tools tab and click PowerShell RDM commandlet to go into the PowerShell console directly within Remote Desktop Manager. The advantage there, I guess there's 2. 1, it's a console environment that's already in RDM. And number 2, the module's already preloaded, so you can just start to call the commands. Cool. Back in my script file, though, as long as you're on the system that has RDM installed, you can call the module directly using import module. You should know that the module name is Remote Desktop Manager.PowerShell module. Yeah. I think tab completion should work there. So if I do import module, remote tab. Yeah, so it fills nice. That. PowerShell is all about saving us typing. Jeffrey Snover, the inventor of PowerShell, would be the first person to tell you that he's a terrible typer.
That's awesome.
PowerShell best practice, you want to periodically run update help to make sure that you have the most recent help articles for the commands.
Yep.
And then we go into command discovery. So on line 20, I'm running a get command against that module. And you see, again, in keeping with PowerShell best practices, the standard verbs, new, get, invoke, set. All of that should be really familiar if you've used PowerShell at all to date.
Sure.
Let's see, as far as what the help looks like, again, standard paradigm with PowerShell, something I do a lot. Get help against a command, looking at just the examples. Looks like this particular one, open RDM session, has a couple examples here. Retrieves the list of available sessions and opens the second element in the list. Okay. Yeah. Any questions, comments, concerns thus far, Jan?
No, I think it's fantastic. I love how you're breaking it down, making it simple for everyone to be able to, beginners and experts as well. No, it's fantastic. I love it.
Okay, good deal. If you've used RDM to any degree, let me come back to the interface. You're using the local data source or the Devolutions cloud. Let me see. I think you go to View, Navigation. As far as choosing your appropriate data source, because you might have more than one configured, that's something else I'll mention parenthetically. I know that RDM can scale to teams. It's got the role-based access control in there, so you can limit which entries team members can use. I mean, all of that is tremendous. I'm pretty much just a party of one, so
fine, yeah.
I don't have to worry about RBAC and stuff myself. But as far as choosing a data source, all that's available. It's the traditional, I've found anyway, the traditional PowerShell paradigm, where when you're wondering, well, can I do such and so with the RDM commandlets? Is it possible for me to do something switching my data source from local to Devolutions or Devolutions to local? So you would normally do something like get command, and you'd try maybe a verb, get, and then the noun part, we know the commandlets all start with RDM, so we can cut down on noise by doing a RDM star, and then source maybe for data source. So that allows us to trim down, and then, of course, the next step, once you find the command, we could get help and look at examples and so forth. Okay, So this bit here on 25 and 26, it looks like we're creating a variable that pulls a reference to the Devolutions online drive, get RDM data source, and then we can call set RDM current data source using that drive. I'll bet we could take advantage of the pipeline. That's how I know that the RDM commandlets were well built, because whoever wrote them had a good understanding of the PowerShell pipeline. And if you're not sure what the pipeline is, that's the magic of being able to take the output from one code segment and put it as an input to the next code segment. So we should be able to do a set RDM current data source. Come on, VS Code. Tab complete on me. Sometimes with VS Code, you have to do Control space to get that to take. Let me right-click this. Yeah, that's just fine. See, so we don't even have to necessarily create that variable. We could have just done this piece here to feed the get into the set.
Cool. Very neat.
Some other code that I found on that Devolutions forum, the support forum, are good control plane operations, seeing what sessions are available based on what kind of session it is. Because I'm a Microsoft specialist, most of the time I'm RDP, but some of my work involves Linux, and in most cases, I'll use SSH. So the same paradigm applies. You would just need for SSH, in this case, you would want to figure out what the connection type is called for SSH. Maybe it's SSH configured, I don't know. But on line 30, we're creating a variable called sessions, where first we retrieve all of our sessions in my Devolutions online drive, and then we're using a where object expression to gather only my RDP sessions, so that cuts down on noise. And then we're using a for each loop here to iterate through each of those RDM sessions, and it's testing their connectivity on the RDP port 3389, and it's echoing back either RDP is open, so the VM is available for business, or it's not. See, so let me. That's
cool.
I think Maurice Coate did that.
Possibly, yeah.
And it's given me, I'd have to clean this up a little bit. It is echoing back the right results.
Sure.
RDP is open on my VM1, VM2, and Cloud Skills. RDP is unavailable because those VMs, it looks like it's echoing error. You can modify the PowerShell, of course, to suppress the error messages to make the output cleaner.
Sure.
But that's just a general idea. Hopefully it starts to give people some ideas of,
Absolutely.
because I like to tell my students that if you're doing some administrative task more than 2 times, that's a candidate for automation.
Yeah, that's so true.
And yes, there's some time on the front end because we need to discover, well, what do the RDP commands call such and so property? You're going to have to invest a little time.
Yeah.
But the great beauty is once you get your script working, it's always going to work. And human nature and forgetfulness are irrelevant because the script is always going to do what it needs to do.
Sure.
In fact, that reminds me of an important point that, again, I think Maurice mentioned on the Devolutions forums. In fact, it's actually mentioned right in your documentation. I think it's so important, I want to quickly bring it up. I think it's on this page. No, it's under tips and tricks right here. Yeah. Reverse engineering an entry structure. It looks like probably because you have so many plates spinning, devolution,
Sure.
that you haven't yet documented every property. And I can understand. There's so much in the dadgum project or product.
Yeah.
So there's this tip here that I think is important to transmit. And what this business is saying is you can get a really fast picture of what a particular property is. Like, let's say you're making a PowerShell script that just is going to set a bunch of custom session properties to save you time,
Yes.
like reconnect on failure, and so the question is, how can you convert, like when you're looking at session properties in RDM, let me go down to properties, as you're going through these tabs, each of these is going to be surfaced in the PowerShell command, the session CmdLets, as a property. And because they're not yet all documented, you have to do a little bit of discovery.
Sure.
And so what I learned in the documentation is that we can right-click the session. I just discovered this very recently. That's why I'm fumbling. Maybe I have to do it from over here on the side. Let me right-click Clipboard. Yeah. So right-click the entry, Clipboard, copy, and that brings up this copy options dialog where you can customize some of the settings. But the real money here is the preview because the sessions are defined in extensible markup language under the hood.
Yeah.
And so the help is saying get a before picture of your VM, just create a session with basic properties, grab the XML, copy it out of here, put it into VS Code as your before state, and then come into the properties of the session and turn on the options that you need the property name for.
Sure.
And then do this again. Look at the XML, get it into VS Code, and then perform a diff or a differential operation. Okay. VS Code's a great tool for that because I'm sure there's an extension that makes it really easy to show the two files side by side and point out the difference. So it'll quickly show you. And so what you're looking for is these element names are going to refer to the actual property name. When you're configuring your set RDM session, you might have your VM session in a variable called $session. You could do $session.connection type equals RD. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that's really neat. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was a really important tip to transmit.
That's cool.
Okay, what's this one doing here? Yeah, this one here is retrieving the session IDs because once you want to use PowerShell to start interacting with your sessions, with your virtual machines, let's say, we're going to need the GUID or the session ID for those sessions. And so what this bit of code is doing is first looking for all of our RDP sessions and sorting them by name. Let's just run this code here to look at the output. And I've got a handful of them here. The name, the group, and then here's the piece that we actually would need, the ID.
Yeah.
And then this for each loop is just going to automate it a little bit. It's going to iterate through all of the settings and just give the VM name with that globally unique ID. And once you've made a note of that, you can then feed it into the set RDM session to set custom properties. You can create a persistent session object in PowerShell by calling new RDM session. And then ultimately, you've got open RDM session to go into the session itself. Notice that the open RDM session, I don't think it has a name property. So that's why it's important for you to get the ID of your session, because you're going to tap into it here. And,
Sure.
and force external is whether you want the RDP session to be outside of RDM, or if you leave this off, that force external flag, then it's going to open your session docked inside of Remote Desktop Manager.
Absolutely. Okay. That's cool.
Questions, comments, concerns, curiosities?
No. This is piques my interest to do a little bit more PowerShell scripting. So
definitely. Yeah.
No, that would be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as changing session parameters, you see this here on lines 45 through 48. We're storing the computer name in a variable, defining the session, the host name, the type of session. Set is where you, again, can pass in properties. And then to cement your changes, there's that update RDM UI commandlet that you would call. So the general waltz, the 1, 2, 3 for changing session properties would be to get your session object, set your changes, and then update to cement them.
Okay, makes sense.
So I think that's it here. Let me see. Let me come back to my session. How can we do this? Open RDM session. Well, I know that VM1 has 2 ID values. I want this first one here. So I'm going to select it and right-click it. And just as a test here, instead of using the variable, I'm just going to put in the ID directly.
Okay.
Let's see if that works. Just a proof of concept. Yeah, so it's opening up. I got some connectivity problem that's probably to do with the VM. But on my other monitor, I've got a remote desktop connection message that popped up.
Okay, yeah.
So, you think about this kind of stuff. This is something I'm actually going to work on later today for my work with PluralSight.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is make a script that spins up my environment with just a single line of PowerShell. So in my course today, for instance, I've got just 2 virtual machines that I need up. And yes, I can go into the Azure portal and select start. But I like the idea of creating a PowerShell function where I can just call the function, specify the VM names, boom. And what I want to do, my end goal, is for them to locate the sessions in RDM and pop them both open into the RDM console. And my dream, my stretch goal for this little bit of PowerShell is to integrate Azure PowerShell to first turn on the VMs, to authenticate to Azure, turn on the VMs, have RDM wait for the VMs to become available, and then connect them and open them up into the console. I'll say to you and our viewers/listeners, again, check my GitHub repo periodically, because I'll definitely post that script once I complete it. And again, the short URL to the repo is timw.info/summer 2019.
Definitely. Okay, I'll put that in the description as well so people can grab it if they need to. Sounds good.
The last piece of the demo is what I call data plane operations, and that comes to the question of how can we use Remote Desktop Manager as a configuration management platform?
Sure.
You might think, well, we use System Center already. We use Puppet. We use Chef. But, especially as a team, if you've bought into RDM and you're using it in a collaborative environment, why not take advantage of storing your PowerShell utility scripts in a central way, that is a Git repository, let's say, and being able to run those scripts against one or more of your sessions. Now that PowerShell is cross-platform and it works with Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, It can be a PowerShell world.
That's exactly it.
So how do we do that back in Remote Desktop Manager?
Okay.
Well, what I normally do, if I need to send a PowerShell command or an entire script into one or more VMs, you can select them over here in your navigation window. You can do multiple select holding down Control or Shift, and then right-click, Execute Script via Agent.
Yeah, cool.
Our readers, our viewers, listeners may be wondering, so is an agent required to use Remote Desktop Manager? And that's a good question. I had, my first several months of using RDM, I didn't even know that an agent exists. So the technical answer is no, not specifically. But if you really want to unlock that link between Remote Desktop Manager and your session VMs, it would behoove you, I think, to install the agent.
Yeah.
So let's see. We go to the Tools ribbon under More Tools. You can get to the RDM agent there. You can download the agent directly from the RDM website. Bottom line is you'll want to install the agent software on your session VMs. And this one we're looking at right here, VM1, is a Windows Server 2019 VM, and I did install the agent. I think I went to the website to download it.
Okay, sure.
And the agent consumes very little RAM. It's, I think, 15 megabytes or something, so it's a low footprint utility. It auto starts by default. It runs as a service. And if we go to its settings, there's really not much to it, to be honest.
Sure.
From Remote Desktop Manager, we can check the agent status. Let me see. If we right-click and go to agent status, you can determine whether or not the VM has the agent installed. But once the agent's installed, you can really get jiggy with it, so to speak, in terms of this execute script via agent. So once again, the idea is that you select one or more sessions, right-click, execute script via agent. And notice you can do shell scripts, but if you go directly to PowerShell, we can run a pipeline directly, or we can send a script file into the VM. And when I first saw this capability, I thought to myself, wait a minute now. PowerShell has very specific rules on remoting and how remote script execution works. But I think you have done some pretty interesting things in how this is implemented. My understanding is that at least with Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP sessions, it's an embedded or like a tunneled RDP session. So you send your script in, it's not exactly using PowerShell remoting. It's almost like RDM sends the file to the host and runs it locally there under the administrative context.
Sure.
So let me see. What if we just wanted to quickly sanity check the status of a service on this server? Please forgive the weed whacking outside my window. You know, Jan, we were talking about Murphy's Law earlier.
Yeah.
As a PluralSight trainer, it's almost always I'm getting ready to record. As soon as I hit record, there's a weed whacker outside, or there's a fire engine going by, or something.
That's okay.
So if we want to get the status of a service, let's say, we can just type that command in. We can have it run under an administrative context. We can keep the window up to look at any output. We can skip the PowerShell profile that you might have defined on that machine. And so it gives us, in very fast fashion, without having to worry about opening up ports or anything, it tapped into that VM and it gives me the service status of the service.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Isn't that
really cool. Yeah, love it.
Then again, execute script via agent. We can do something more robust if we want to and run a file. And we can browse to that file. In this case, it is drive E, I think, summer 2019. So I've got a script on my D drive called config script. And it does something a little bit more invasive, I guess you could say. And again, this is just a toy example. You know, let's say you want to install some software from the Chocolatey repository. So we can configure the PowerShell get module to do a register. This one-liner is one that I actually use all the time. It installs the Chrome browser. And then maybe we want to install a module from the PowerShell gallery that gets system uptime, and then we want to call that function. So that's the config script. Let's again come back to our browse window. Summer 19 config script. So here we can execute the entire contents of that function in the context of that virtual machine. So it's registering the pack. It'll do whatever. I mean, that's one of the great beauties of PowerShell. Yeah. Because PowerShell is tapping into the .NET framework or .NET Core, you're able to hit any subsystem of your machines. And through this use of embedded sessions, I have yet to test this on Linux. I'm interested to see how the script execution is implemented with Linux sessions. That's on my to-do list. May take a while for that to come back, and I didn't debug the script first, so this is live without a net. Unable to find the pack. Okay, so it skipped that step, but it's currently downloading Chrome, and I guess proof of concept demonstrated. We're remotely running PowerShell in our session from our desktop host. I think that's it. That's the long and the short of what I wanted to show today.
No, that is definitely... I think you're going to pique some interest with a lot of our viewers who, several of them have asked me, hey, can you show us some more PowerShell stuff? And I said, I can't, but I can definitely have an expert come on here. This is really cool. So I think, like you said, though, it definitely unlocks and gives administrators the ability to really get into access the resources that they need on their virtual machines, especially when you're managing hundreds or thousands of machines or whatever.
Ain't that the truth?
It's so practical, and it definitely, as much as we love RDC, man, I think it's great to be able to manage all of these from one central location. And on top of that, I think the fact that RDM even has things like you said, the role-based access controls for teams and password management, it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to access those VMs with the right permissions.
That could be another really cool whole discussion, couldn't it? Because the credential management is outstanding in remote desktop. I can tap into my 1Password or LastPass.
Yep.
You can store credentials there, and you don't even necessarily, team members don't ever need to know what the raw credential is. They can just access the object. Really nicely done. And
actually, I failed to mention, I'll have to double check. I know the new RDM free version, they just recently came out a couple weeks ago. We've unlocked a whole bunch of things in it. Our CEO came by and says, we want to make this available for any single users that are not team-based, just that like them go at it and use it to its full capability.
Right.
So we've unlocked credential inheritance, credential entries, playlists, smart folders, and MacroScript tools is now unlocked in the free version as well.
Beautiful.
It was really a bold move because, but the idea is he wants to offer something that was free for users that just want to use RDM for its full capabilities, and then we'll leave the enterprise version for people that are running multiple teams and want to access more of the maybe two-factor authentication, devolution password server, and so forth.
Right.
But yeah, so they definitely, you might want to check that out because that could be helpful. And especially in our community of tech people, I always have friends that are like, hey, what do you use to manage your 5 servers or whatever? And I'll tell them Remote Desktop Management free has even more options now. So definitely something to check out as well. Well, man, Tim, thank you so much. This is great. I love the PowerShell tips. I'm learning a lot. So now I'm going to probably get maybe a book on that. And speaking of books, I heard that you've written or co-authored and contributed to a bunch of books. Can you tell us about maybe your latest project and maybe where we can find these books if people are interested in some more in-depth training tutorials?
Yeah, sure thing. I took a year or 2 off from writing books, but I'm back at it full steam, actually doing 2 book projects this year. Okay. I'm co-authoring the book. It's for the Microsoft certification exam AZ300, Microsoft Azure Architecture. The title is called Microsoft Exam Ref. It's Microsoft Pressbook. And the other one is for Wiley. I'm doing a dummies book on Microsoft Azure. It's actually called Microsoft Azure for Dummies. And I like writing introductory level stuff, so I'm awfully excited about that project.
Sure.
My bibliography is at my website, techtrainertim.com. Of course, you could always look on Amazon or whatever. But
Sure.
yeah, I've always been kind of a niche writer with the tech stuff. Like you and I were talking earlier, Jan, about Minecraft.
Yeah.
I got deep into Minecraft development and Minecraft server a few years back. And again, we were talking about this. My 9-year-old daughter Zoe is still active in Minecraft. So
That's cool.
It's always fun.
My son as well. I think it'll be fun. Maybe a sneak peek, but we might do a Minecraft episode in the future. So I think that's really cool. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But all right, so I'll put links to your website as well as your GitHub repository so that people can access that. I'll put that in the show notes below in the YouTube video. And is there anywhere, do people follow you on any social media?
Yeah, I would suggest that our viewers follow Tech Trainer Tim. That's my Twitter handle. Tim. And I post pretty much every single day on Azure, public cloud, Microsoft Stack, and just IT in general. So I think it's an informative feed for you to follow.
That's really cool. Well, I'll put that in it as well. Well, Tim, you know what? I had a lot of fun today. In fact,
Same
I
here.
could literally sit here and listen all day, but I know we got things to do. But I hope the YouTubers and those people listening and watching at home or at work during their break will enjoy this. And if you guys want more, send me a comment, and I'm sure we could get Tim back on sometime, and he could be a regular HQ special guest. That'd be awesome.
I'd love it.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Tim, and I really appreciate your time today. And thanks for all your expert tips today.
You're welcome. Thanks again, Jan.
All right, everybody, thank you guys so much for watching Devolutions HQ this week. And come back for more as we help you control the IT chaos. So thank you guys so much. Bye.